So in chapter 18, we're going to be looking at nutrition. So as humans, our body needs fuel. We also need materials in order to develop and grow and to heal things like wounds. A nutrient is a chemical substance supplied by the environment that we need in order to survive. When we think of chemicals, we tend to think of things like cleaners and that type of thing as a chemical, when really anything on the periodic table is a chemical. So all things really are based out of or made from chemicals, okay? And so some of the things we need are macronutrients, micronutrients, and essential nutrients. Macro means large, so macronutrients are those that we need in large amounts. Micro means small, like microscope. So micronutrients are those that we need in a very small amount. So for our macronutrients, we need things like carbs, proteins, and fats. We need lots of those. And within those, we get our micronutrients, and those are going to be our vitamins and minerals. Essential nutrients are those that we can't make, like certain amino acids, so we have to get them from somewhere else. And then, of course, we need water as well. So nowadays we have all sorts of special types of diets, which can be done for personal reasons, religious reasons, and even because of regional limitations. All right, so these require paying attention to those nutrient needs, because if you are cutting out all meat, then you have to make sure you are getting those proteins and amino acids from somewhere. If you don't eat red meat, you also have to pay attention to other sources of things like iron, copper, zinc, and B12. Increases in fiber are healthy generally, but they can also decrease how much we absorb of certain things. Vegetarians, for instance, have to be sure to get iron from other sources. Here in America, most of these specialist diets are by a personal choice, due to a personal choice. But in many countries, this is caused by a lack of resources, whether that is financial resources to buy these items or availability of food. However, many of these people are still very healthy and have very healthy diets. So here in this chart, this kind of defines some of those specialist vegetarian diets, like pesco vegetarian and that sort of thing, if you ever wondered what these are and what they mean. So why do we eat? Well, we can eat because of things like emotions. If we get upset, sometimes we eat. We'll go get some ice cream, or we might eat because we're stressed. Or if we're very, very upset or stressed, we might not eat at all. But the root of why we should eat is that we eat in order to power or to fuel all the activities of life. When we discuss appetite here, we need to be thinking true appetite when you're really hungry, not the emotionally driven appetite where we just want something because we just want it. We have several hormones that control appetite, and those have an effect on the hypothalamus. We've got insulin secreted from the pancreas. The function here is to store fat by stimulating fat cells, which are adipocytes, to take in glucose and convert it to fat or glycogen for storage. That's the function here for the pancreas. We also have leptin that is released from adipocytes whenever we eat. So this suppresses the appetite by releasing what we call neuropeptide Y, and that in turn stimulates the desire for us to eat. This is actually a negative feedback that occurs when we eat. Leptin drives metabolism. What is metabolism? Well, it's the sum of all the chemical reactions in our body. It's also the way that nutrients are changed and used in anabolic and catabolic, that's building up and breaking down, in order to support all the activities that we do, in order to support life. Okay, so leptin drives metabolism. If it is low, that means that fat stores are depleted, and so it tells metabolism to conserve energy and increases the appetite. If leptin is high, it means that fat stores are plentiful and you don't have to eat. You don't need to eat. We also have ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, and it is secreted by the stomach, and it increases the appetite by releasing neuropeptide Y. All right, and so it increases food intake and fat storage. If you block the production of ghrelin, it can help with weight loss. So These are areas that people try to research and take advantage of in some of the medications where we're trying to find that magic bullet to help us lose weight. Fasting and low-calorie diets stimulate more production of ghrelin, so they can actually make you more hungry. Inhibition of ghrelin hormone can also help in weight loss. All right, so here this is looking at the negative feedback that we were just discussing, how we can stimulate appetite or inhibit appetite. So leptin signals the hypothalamus to suppress appetite because it inhibits neuropeptide Y from being released. Ghrelin, on the other hand, I think I probably said ghrelin. I have a tendency to want to say ghrelin instead of ghrelin. Is going to secrete, it is secreted by stomach acid, and it's going to enhance appetite by causing neuropeptide Y to be released instead of inhibiting it. Let's take a look here at carbs, carbohydrates. These are sugars and starches. Energy is gained from these by breaking the chemical bonds and using that to drive cellular respiration and make ATP, right? All of our energy requirements are met by using ATP. So carbohydrates can be a monosaccharide, mono meaning one. That's going to be things like fructose, glucose, or galactose, which is seen here in the bottom, a simple sugar. Where they can be disaccharides, where you have a glucose monomer. Okay, so you can have a disaccharide, di meaning two, and that's where you have two bonded together and forms a larger molecule like sucrose. All right. For example, you can have glucose and fructose, and that's going to make sucrose. You can have glucose and glucose bonded, and that's going to make maltose, and you can have glucose and galactose, and that's going to make lactose. And do you remember what breaks those three things down? Sucrase, maltase, lactase. The cells in our body need a continuous supply of glucose. So where do we get this from? Where do we get our carbohydrates from? Well, we have complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. We've talked about fructose, glucose, and galactose being monosaccharides. Those are simple carbohydrates. So we get those from things like milk sugar, beet sugar, molasses. Those are disaccharides. Those are still simple carbs. Monosaccharides from things like honey and fruit. And then we get our complex carbohydrates from things like plants, more plant type foods, and glycogen from meats as well. Digestion then is going to break those complex carbohydrates down into monosaccharides that we can absorb, because when they are di or polysaccharides, meaning many, we can't break them down. And so cellulose, you have to have a special enzyme to break down, and human beings don't have this enzyme. Cellulose is the main component of plant cell walls, and since we can't digest it, it acts as fiber in our diet, which is important. It's a complex carbohydrate found in generally in plants, and it provides fiber or bulk. So carbohydrates are absorbed from the digestive tract. Enzymes from the liver, like maltase, lactase, and sucrase, are in the microvilli, and they convert them and they break them down, right, to smaller, simple sugars. Neurons need a continuous supply of glucose in order to function. So even just a temporary decrease can cause an impairment. So the body has a minimum supply of carbs that is needed. The liver can convert some non-carbohydrates like amino acids or glycerol into glucose, and we do that through a process called gluconeogenesis, right? Genesis meaning beginning. So how many carbs do we need? Well, that can depend on your activity level. If you're more physically active, obviously you're going to need more carbs. You're going to need more energy. 125 to 175 grams a day is needed to avoid protein breakdown and avoid causing a metabolic disorder. The liver is going to store about 100 grams of glycogen and muscles need about 200 grams, which will meet energy needs for about 12 hours at a resting state. Now you may be wondering then, if we need 125 to 175 grams, how do these low carb diets work? Well, low carb diets work by tricking your body into changing from sugar metabolism to protein metabolism. And so you go into what is called ketosis. Ketosis is a metabolic state where fat actually provides the fuel for the body. We get a lot of bang for the buck with fats, right? Fats have a lot of energy. And so since your body has nowhere else to go, it goes and pulls on your fat reserves and breaks those down for energy. And so that is a ketogenic type diet. Lipids. Lipids are our fat and fat-like substances. These are organic compounds. Organic, people tend to think of, if I ask you what organic means, you're going to want to think organic means it's natural, grown without pesticides, etc. That's not the connotation of the word that we want here. Here, organic means it is a carbon and hydrogen containing compound. Inorganic is going to be anything else that's not carbon and hydrogen containing off the periodic table. And so those are two ways that we classify materials. So organic here, we're meaning a hydrocarbon. And you can see here we have some long chain hydrocarbon portions here. And that's what makes this an organic material. Okay, their function is to supply energy for cell processes and help us to do things like build our cell membranes, like the phospholipid bilayer. All right, and so we have some fat-like substances in there as well. We've got common dietary lipids, and these are fats, and we call them triglycerides. And you can see by looking at this picture where the tri comes from. 1, 2, 3. The triglycerides supply energy for cellular process, and then they help in building, of course, like we said, structures like our membranes. Where do these come from in the diet, you asked? Lipids. Where do we get these? Well, triglycerides are found in plant-based and animal-based foods. We have saturated and unsaturated as the main types. We've got saturated fats, mostly found in things of animal origin like meat, also eggs and lard, etc. But there's also some in things like palm or coconut oil. Saturated fats can cause a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, okay? We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. I don't want to go there just yet. So unsaturated fats are going to be the fats that are found in more plant-based things like seeds, nuts, and plants, like safflower oil or corn oil. And so these are going to be the healthiest types of fats. And so saturated is bad, so thumbs down. Unsaturated is good. Those are healthy fats. Cholesterol is also found in things like egg yolks, abundant, like if you eat liver, and also in some things like milk, butter, and cheese. And you don't have cholesterol in plants. All right, so mono unsaturated fats, that's like olive, peanut, or canola oil. Those are our healthiest guys because we don't have cholesterol. Plus it's mono unsaturated. When you're looking at labels, you want to be wary of claims that say 99% fat-free. That usually refers to the percentage by weight, not the calories. 99% fat-free, creamy, yummy thing may be largely air and water, and so therefore in that formed fat is very little of it. But when the air and water are removed, as is what happens in the body, the fat percentage just goes way, way high. So you have to be careful with that. The lipids in foods are in the form of phospholipids, cholesterol, and triglycerides. Lipids provide a variety of functions. The main thing is, of course, going to be to supply energy. And I've already said that gram for gram, or at least I've hinted to it, fat contains way more energy, twice as much energy as a carb or a protein. So fats give us more bang for the buck. A triglyceride has to undergo hydrolysis to be able to release energy. If you remember, hydrolysis is the chemical breakdown of a compound due to a reaction with water. Digestion breaks triglycerides down into fatty acids, glycerol, and then the products are then transported to the lymph system, and then remember, then it goes on to the blood, and then of course on to the tissues from there. Fatty acids have to be converted to acetyl-CoA and then go into cellular respiration from there. So you can see here we're looking at the citric acid cycle. So we've got to get to acetyl-CoA there, and then we're able to get ATP, our energy. So the liver is able to convert fatty acids from one form to another, but it can't make certain fatty acids, and these are essential fatty acids like linoleic acid. Linoleic acid is needed to make phospholipids, which are needed for our cell membranes and myelin sheaths, so this is vital. We get these from things like corn oil, cottonseed, or soy. Free fatty acids are used to make triglycerides, phospholipids, and lipoproteins, and the liver uses fatty acids to make a variety of lipids. Lipids can combine with proteins and form what we have said is lipoproteins or lipoproteins. These are less dense than proteins, and they're classified by their density, which of course reflects their composition. We have very low density lipoproteins, VLDLs, and these are produced in the liver. And we have a high concentration of triglycerides there. Low density lipoproteins have a high concentration of cholesterol and are the primary cholesterol carrying lipoprotein. And then our HDLs, that's our high density lipoproteins, have a high concentration of protein and a lower concentration of lipids. And so we pick these up from the peripheral tissues, and then it returns back to the liver. And so these are the types of things that you're going to see if you get your cholesterol checked. You're going to get a ratio of your HDLs and your LDLs. The liver controls the total amount of cholesterol in the body, and making it and releasing it to the blood, and or removing it and placing it in bile. Cholesterol is then used to make bile salts. Okay, so this is used for cell structural material, organelles, organelle membranes, and it's also a precursor for certain sex and adrenal hormones. Adipose can also store triglycerides, and the types and the locations of chemical bonds between the carbon atoms of the fatty acid molecules affects how healthy that particular fat can be. So as you can see down here in this bottom picture, you have the straight chain fatty acid and the unsaturated fatty acid. Well, the straight chain fatty acid is going to stack up really well. The unsaturated fatty acid is not going to stack up and pile up and pack together very well. So monounsaturated fats, like those from avocado or olives, are healthy. They promote cardiovascular health. Saturated fats that really stack up and can pile up, like those in butter or red meat, contribute to heart disease. They build up in the walls of arteries as plaque. Okay, so the site of this double bond then contributes to the fat's degree of unsaturation and is quite important. If we have things like omega-3 fatty acids, those have double bonds between them, all right, between the third and fourth carbon. They're a little bit more healthful than say an omega-6 fatty acid that's got double bonds between the 6th and 11th carbon. So location can make a difference as well. Proteins are long polymers of amino acids. They have a wide variety of functions, including making the building blocks to make more protein, structural proteins, hormones, enzymes, antibodies, plasma proteins, and they also help to supply energy. Proteins are broken down into amino acids in order to give us energy. We can also take the nitrogen group or amine group, which is NH2, off of them and remove them through a process we call deamination, or removing the amine. Then the nitrogen groups can come together and form urea, which is removed by the kidneys. All right, and so this occurs through various pathways. Proteins are absorbed to the blood and then to the cells. They form things also like enzymes that control the rate of metabolic reactions. So they're very important, making clotting factors. Other things they do is form keratin of the skin and hair. They make elastin and collagen. They make so many things, even antibodies that help to fight infection. And so these are very important, all right? So when we're looking at removal of the amine through the kidneys, this is done, it carries that urea, right? So if the nitrogen groups react, form urea, and they're carried to the kidneys and then excreted in the urine. So certain kidney disorders can actually impair the removal of urea in the blood, and that causes your urea blood level concentration to increase. So in order to check for that, we would do a blood urea nitrogen test, BUN, and that determines the blood urea concentration, and that is one test that is often used to evaluate kidney function. So proteins are digested and broken down into their constituent amino acids, the amino acids they're made of, and then those are linked following genetic instructions and used in order to build new proteins. So free amino acids can then also be used for energy in some conditions. So we make new proteins and we get energy. We have a lot of pathways that can help break down the leftover parts of those amino acids. And the path that is taken depends on what amino acids you have. So some from things like acetyl-CoA, and that's when we use pantothenic acid. The vitamin here that you're going to need for that is coenzyme A. And so the vitamins that we have are helpful to the breakdown of these amino acids. So that's really important that we have our balanced diet and get all the vitamins and minerals they need because they help to function in metabolic pathways. One of the processes here, the process for protein catabolism, is gluconeogenesis. All right. So where do we get proteins? Well, there are some sources you probably know: meat, fish, poultry, obviously cheese and milk, but you can also get them from legumes like beans and peas, cereals, even from things like spinach that actually have some protein in them. So we need 20 types of amino acids. We can, well, those that can be synthesized by the body are what we call non-essential. And those that we can't make are essential, all right? So the human body can make many non-essential amino acids, but there are 8 that we cannot make. And these are the essential amino acids, meaning that we must get them out of our diet. So we do need them in order to have protein synthesis. So the ones labeled with an E here are essential, okay? And so CH here means that growing children need them as part of their diet as well. Essential amino acids are not stored, so we've got to have a constant source of these, or they need to be, coming in continually from our diet. We classify proteins based on the type of amino acids they provide, or the amino acids they provide. Complete proteins have enough of the essential amino acids to maintain body tissue for normal growth and development, things like milk, meat, and eggs. Then we have incomplete proteins, which don't provide enough to maintain body tissues for normal growth and development. For example, corn does not have enough amino acids like tryptophan or lysine. Many plant proteins have too little of one or more essential amino acids that we need in order to provide adequate nutrition for a person to maintain health. However, if you combine appropriate plant foods, then you can put together, they can make a complete protein that can supply an adequate diversity of those dietary amino acids. So for example, beans are low in methionine, but they have enough lysine. Rice lacks lysine, but has enough methionine. So that's why you will often see meals composed of beans and rice, because that gives you that complete protein. So throughout our life, if we are healthy, protein is continuously built up and broken down. Overall gain should equal overall loss, and this gives us a state of dynamic equilibrium. So we're talking about balance of nitrogen here. Proteins contain a high percentage of nitrogen, so the amount of nitrogen taken in should be equal to the amount excreted. So if you have a negative nitrogen balance, that means you're not getting enough, and that occurs from starvation. A positive nitrogen balance is when we have developed in growing children, pregnant women, or athletes in training. Because proteins have a high percentage of nitrogen, dynamic equilibrium also brings that nitrogen balance. So nitrogen taken in equals the amount excreted. So, as well as supplying those essential amino acids that we need, proteins provide the nitrogen, and they also provide other elements for synthesizing non-essential amino acids and some other non-protein nitrogenous substances. The dietary amount can vary depending, of course, on the size of your body, your metabolic rate, and your nitrogen balance composition initially. So typically the protein intake should be about 10% of your diet. Most people should consume 60 to 150 grams of protein per day. There are exceptions here. For pregnant women, they need a positive nitrogen balance because you are building a new human being, and so you need to increase your protein, not necessarily your total calories, but you got to increase your protein. The recommended amount per day is 30 grams of protein per day for a pregnant woman, 20 for a nursing mother. Adult intake is about 0.8 per kilogram of body weight, or 10%, as I already stated. And so this is important. Protein deficiency can cause muscle loss and a decrease in plasma proteins. This also causes osmotic pressure of plasma to decrease. Remember that water follows protein, kind of like we say water follows salt, and so that can actually trigger edema.